Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're joining from today. Thanks for joining our live stream here today, a special edition of our live stream here to talk about enterprise application architecture, enterprise architecture, everything related to architecture within digital transformation. I'm going to introduce our guest here in just a moment. But first, before I do that, I just want to invite the audience to ask questions along the way. So we're gonna jump into this topic here, and I'm going to get started with some questions, but really encourage the audience to ask any questions or provide comments along the way. We're watching all the streams across all the platforms that we're streaming here today, so we'll keep an eye on those questions and get to your questions ASAP. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world digital transformation journeys, and we're an independent tech agnostic company, so we're not affiliated with any software vendors. And joining me today to have this conversation is Mehdi Aftahi from Technology Evaluation Center. So Mehdi, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me, and hello to all the audience.
Yeah, it's great to see you here again. We've collaborated on these live streams and podcast interviews in the past, but this is sort of a special edition to really give a preview in some ways of an event that you guys are hosting that we're also involved with. We're going to be participating in with you, but TEC, your company, is putting on an event here in just a couple of weeks in Orlando. Could you tell us a little bit about that event and why you're describing it? By the way, I'm going to put up on the screen a registration link where you can go learn more about the event and the event page itself. So you can go right here. You can learn more about the event. You can also register here. But so I'll leave that up while you're describing what the event is, Mehdi.
Yeah. The event is called the Enterprise Software Showcase, and it's the 32nd version of this event that we are holding this year in Orlando. And it's from May 7th to 9th in Renaissance Hotel in Orlando. And it's an event that is for anybody that is in the process of upgrading their enterprise applications, basically can benefit from. We call it the digital transformation pathway. Basically, it just tries to bring to the attention of the participants the things that you have to think about when you're starting your journey of upgrading your systems, your ERP systems, your CRM systems, or in general, getting to know what your current status of your application is and what's the best way to optimize and get into a new digital platform for your organization could be. In there, we have, aside companies such as yourselves that have specialized in providing very valuable advice to clients. We also have, vendors that are participating, and as well, they can provide the users with valuable information about how to go about, get their project on the go and reach to the end results that they require.
Yeah, it's a great sort of a one-stop place to learn a lot about different software vendors and also system or consulting providers like ourselves. So it's a great event. I'm really looking forward to it. I hate to admit this, I've never been to this event before, so this will be my first time. I'm excited to join, and not only am I attending, our company sponsoring it, one of the sponsors there. So I'm really excited to see this. And there's not a lot out there in the marketplace where you can go to one place and sort of network with other people that are going through the same thing and get to know software vendors at the same time. So if you want to learn, see the agenda, learn more, you can click that link right here. You can also register on that link there. So be sure to check it out. I'll leave it up here while we're going through the discussion. And before I jump into my questions here, Mehdi, which, by the way, this is a topic we're going to cover you're going to cover this in Orlando in a couple of weeks, right? You're going to have a presentation on this in a little bit more detail.
Yeah. So there's something else that I wanted to add for this event is that we changed the format a little bit from the previous versions of the event, which we used to be more focused on vendors and selections and how to go about doing the distinctions or figuring out which vendor fits your requirements the best. Now we expanded this a little bit, and we're now more talking about the entire process of your selection, from business justifications to enterprise architecture, and as well into its selection and evaluation and contract and price negotiation. So the entire scope of a digital transformation journey is covered. And for us to be able to do that, we had to bring other advisory firms such as yourselves to be able to bring in different points of view that coming from change management maybe perspective or other aspects of the implementation also is very key for everybody to get that kind of one-stop shop kind of view of everything that's happening. So that's a little bit of a change of format from the previous versions of our events.
Yeah, sounds very cool, and looking forward to it. And I'm curious to hear from the audience too, what city and country you're joining from, and is this an event that's of interest to you? Is it something you plan on attending? Just drop in the chat if you don't mind what city and country you're joining from as well. I'd love to hear from you here today. So just to get started and sort of give us this preview for one of many topics that's going to be covered at the ESS event here in a couple of weeks. Can you start by maybe describing for us, just to understand what enterprise application architecture is? Like, how would you summarize the whole concept for a layperson that's never heard the term before?
Yeah, sure. Like any other, concept of an architecture, we're talking about the blueprint of your current applications within your organization. So if you're talking about a manufacturing organization or service-oriented organization, you have certain business processes, you have certain software applications that currently are installed within your organizations. They may work in tandem with each other. There might be integrations between different applications. But at any given time, if you take a snapshot of what applications and what business processes you're working with, you get a picture that might not be optimized for your might be optimized, might not be optimized for your operations. So basically, with an enterprise architecture, what we mean is getting the blueprint of all of your applications, and superimposed on that is the business processes and your business requirements, and to figure out where there are any gaps that your applications are basically lacking functionality for the business processes, and as well, if there are any manual processes or Excel forms, which we see all the time in the various organizations that are covering all those gaps with Excel sheets. So this provides you with as I said, with a snapshot of what's happening today. And if you take that further, we try to optimize the architecture for a more streamlined and best practice kind of approach for your business processes. So and get rid of some of the redundant applications or things that are overlapping, or the applications that have duplications in terms of business processes and data reentry and everything else that comes in there. So once you get that picture, it usually gives a very good indication on how efficient or inefficient your current systems are, and how they are actually interacting with each other.
Right.
Something that is very important in this concept of transformation of your architecture. So before we get into the digital transformation, we're talking about conceptually transforming your architecture into an ideal scenario, ideal situation. And by doing so, you're trying to eliminate bottlenecks, overlaps in terms of technology. Maybe there are some cost savings that you can do, but more importantly, you need to look at the vision of your organization, where you want to be in the future, like 5-10 years down the road, where you want to be, and whether your current architecture can support you achieve your goal in your journey for your organization. That architecture should be able to support not only the current needs, but a little bit, helping you in achieving your future goals and the vision for the company.
Interesting. So if I were to play devil's advocate for a minute, let's just assume I'm a software sales rep. I'm going to sell you some ERP software. And I say, Mehdi, what you just described, that's great, but don't even bother because my technology is going to replace all your legacy systems anyway. So you don't need to really worry too much about defining that enterprise architecture. It's a one solution, one size fits all. You're going to deploy it and replace all your systems. So about architecture. How do you respond to that? Or is that something you hear from software vendors at times?
Yeah, typically all the software vendors, with all due respect to them, it's something that we in this environment we all have to work together, and there are things that we actually learn from software vendors, and it is true that our goal in architecture redesign is to replace everything, if it's possible, with one single solution.
Right.
And but which system we don't know, and also there could be in an organization certain areas or processes that it's not worth bringing into a single solution, and if you do, you may raise the price or the complexity of the application. So we had projects where for example the client had bunch of different businesses within their organization, and for example there was a car dealership application that if we wanted to bring it in to the ERP by itself, the cost would triple or quadruple, and also you will eliminate the ability for various vendors to be competing, because the ERP requirements and needs could be very simple and very affordable, but once you bring in that specialized functionality, then you're bound to just go to a tier 1 or a tier 1.1 kind of vendor, and which the price will go high up, and while there shouldn't be any reason for that. So in the if you're thinking about ideology of the architecture, our goal is usually to bring in all the application into one fold and just have one single solution. In many cases we are able to do that, but in some cases it's worth to keep some of the niche functionality on the side and have that scenario played out in terms of what would happen if I take this functionality out of the core ERP, and how would actually reduce the price and reduce the risk of going with a single solution. So yes, vendors love to provide a single solution. We are actually recommending that as well. However, which solution and at what kind of price point and complexity, that's the type of answer that you will get when you are going through the enterprise architecture. So in this kind of project, we come up with multiple scenarios. Like we're going to say, okay, if you go with the one single solution, these are the possible solutions that you can come up with. And also if you bring in a 2 solution or 3 solution, a best of breed kind of scenario, what would you gain? What would you lose? And that is part of the research that allows you to make an informed decision before getting into negotiations with vendors.
Yeah, it's a great point. And there's a lot of secret sauce, competitive advantage, and unique ways of doing business that are tied up in your legacy systems. And whether you're going to replace them or not is a different story, or how you're going to replace them or not is a different story. But you've got to understand what is in those systems and how they integrate, and basically what you're dealing with and what you're moving from. And to your point, that helps you define the business requirements so that you can pick the right vendor or vendors to help you satisfy your needs going forward, and also to make sure you don't lose any of that secret sauce that you've built over decades in many
For
cases.
sure.
A lot of these companies customize solutions, or they built solutions, which, okay, maybe you're not going to keep them, but you at least need to understand what you built and why you have it there and what you want to try and replicate going forward.
Yeah. And another part of the, when you're doing this kind of architecture work is to determining your roadmap. How are you going to go about doing that transformation? So in bigger organizations, it may not be as easy as rip and replace everything in one shot. So you may have to go through different projects. You'd have to define different projects and understand the impact of each of these projects in the overall picture. So what we are recommending our clients to do is to, once you identify your ultimate goal in terms of your architecture, you create a master plan, and you go towards that enterprise master plan. And to go there, you need step-by-step approach, phased approach maybe. And in each phase, you define your targets, your what you gain, what you lose, which applications, whether legacy systems or different ERP systems that you have, how do you basically, what timeline you decommission them, what happens to the data. So you made a good point. Like you basically create this whole entire legacy system, which has all the data, your history, your know-how within the organization. So you don't want to lose that. So how do we bring that into the new architecture? That's all part of the roadmap that needs to be defined. And within that roadmap, yes, there's going to be places where you actually have to interact with vendors and system integrators and learn from them and how to do that. But if you go to the system integrators, they usually try to sell you a solution before they understand where the complexities are. So what we are trying to do is to basically eliminate that kind of a problem.
Yeah, that's there's a lot of decommissioning needs to happen too in the phase.
Yeah.
Move those. Is that you or is that me? I don't know.
No, it's mine. Somebody's
okay. Rookie mistake. It's okay. No, but there's a lot there. You mentioned the word decommissioning, and I think that's a key thing too. Is you're not going to rip out all those systems overnight, and usually it's not going to happen all at once. And so you've got to figure out, how are we going to, what's the methodical way that we're going to move away from those systems? How are we going to get the data out? How are we going to take that or tangle all that secret sauce we built within those systems? We're going to get that into the new system. What capabilities do we need to replicate or build upon in the new system? And what capabilities are we going to sort of scrap or start over with in a new system? There's just all these questions that need to be answered that come from defining what your enterprise architecture is, at least starting with the current state.
Yeah, there is always a great benefit in the clients to really understand their own projects, right? So we often see clients that trust the system integrators or the vendors going in blindly and saying that, oh, this software, this system integrator worked for our competitor company, or they have a very good track record within our industry. So there is no reason for this not to work for our company or our organizations. But what I always say is that every single project, every single client is different. It has its own, challenges. Your organization may not be the same as the next door organization within the same industry even. So you need to understand what works for you and for your organization, and what does not work for you. And also, it's really important because the starting point of these digital transformation projects are not always the same. If a company implemented vendors' applications successfully, you don't know where they started from, where the initial data platform and their even the maturity of the organization was. So that alone could actually be a challenge for your organization if you go with the same vendor. I'm not saying that you have to necessarily choose a different vendor. I'm saying that you have to do your own homework before jumping on in a project with a service provider.
Yeah, makes total sense. I want to turn to the audience too, and just get to a couple comments and questions here. This is from Yassine on LinkedIn. Says, hello, who's your guest, please? I missed the presentation, most likely. Sorry. That's okay. This is Mehdi Aftahi from Technology Evaluation Centers. We're here talking about enterprise application architecture. I'm surprised you didn't recognize you. I mean, it's sort of like asking who you see Tom Cruise on the screen. You say,
no,
who is that?
Not as good looking. So,
but you are well known in the industry. Speaking of well known in the industry, we also have Peter Bjorkman from Scandinavia here on LinkedIn. And he says, yeah, Peter Bjorkman from Oslo, Norway, also known as the previous chief architect of Infor M3 and the most experienced ERP, CPQ, and aftermarket expert in Scandinavia. So thank you for being here. Peter, I did not know he was the architect of Infor M3. I know who Peter Bjorkman is, but I did not know that was his background. So speaking of someone who knows architecture probably pretty well, someone that built the architecture of Infor M3, which is one of the leading ERP products, that's good to know. Here's a question for you that I'll maybe broaden a little bit, Mehdi. This is from Aries on YouTube. And Aries says, thanks for the information. I wonder if there's any linkage between ERP and electronic medical record. And I know that's very specific to healthcare in particular, but in general, maybe I'll broaden the question a little bit. Is it fair to say that you can have linkages or a semi-infinite number of linkages between your core back office ERP system and other types of applications that you might need?
For sure. Actually, we recently we have done a project for electronic health records, and there are linkages for sure, because even identification of patients and the patient records, you have that in your electronic health records, but eventually you have to somehow link that to your accounting system or other systems which are part of the ERP system. And this is a very good example of where the enterprise architecture project could actually play a big role. So to define where you want to have that integration points or integration point to be set. So there are certain functionality that any electronic health record or any other niche application can provide, which can overlap with some of the functionality that your ERP system can provide. So for example, if an organization doesn't have an ERP system, only has the electronic health records. So I'm sure that there are certain functionality that the vendors in electronic health record, EHR realm added to their applications to make sure that certain functionalities are covered. But if you have an ERP system in place, or you're planning to have an ERP in place, then you need to define whether you to use those functionality from your niche applications or hand over those functionality to the core ERP. So that's a very good example where the enterprise architecture could play a big role in terms of, let's say that you're replacing your ERP system, or you already have an ERP system, you're looking for an EHR, electronic health record system. So for us is to define where that border is, where the scope goes from one application to the other one, and define the functionality requirements for each one of these applications, or whether there is an application that can cover both in single application. So that's probably one of those examples that I was saying before, that if you try to do that, you may not be able to find a very affordable solution to be able to do that for yourself. So very good question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it is a good question, and it's also a good reminder or a way to underscore the importance of architecture, especially in situations where you're in a regulated industry like healthcare. The same could be said for utilities and telco and government, of course. Industry or food and beverage, that's another one that we commonly see, where you're going to have legacy systems that you have to keep around for certain regulatory specifications and needs and things of that nature. So it's pretty rare.
Adding those functionality to your core ERP could cost you a lot of money, and the best practices may not be actually provided within the ERP system. So in this kind of scenarios, that's where we tend to promote a best of breed or a niche functionality application to accompany the basic ERP or the core ERP for the organization. But again, you need to define each of these applications, where each of these applications start and end in terms of their scope and where to interact with each other. And that's part of the requirements of the accounting or the other business processes within the organization that defines what kind of information needs to be exchanged between the two different platforms.
Yeah, and it's that's a super important exercise, not only assessing your current state, but also as you define your future state and where you're moving towards. How are you going to tie these different systems together, and how are you going to integrate them? How are you going to test the integration and the data flow between them? And there's a lot that stems from defining that architecture that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I guess just to maybe bring it back up a level and sort of getting back to the big picture here, why is enterprise? And I think we've sort of touched on this a little bit, but I'll ask it more explicitly. Why is enterprise architecture? Why is it so important to a digital transformation?
Okay, so it is important because you need to identify the where you're starting from and where you want to go, right? So in that process, I mentioned that you need to identify your current systems, where your data is hosted, how much effort you have to do to basically cleanse and port the data into your new applications. It's important for you to know your business vision, where you're going to be in 5 to 10 years, and that dictates how you're going to go about your application or the architecture redesign. And also in terms of the enterprise maturity, how mature your organization is in terms of to being able to absorb the change or the impact of the change that is coming to you. All of those are critical information that you need to have before getting into the selection and the implementation of your vendors. So the bottom line is that doing an architecture review and design, or that the research that you're putting in there may be, you might be spending a month or two in terms of doing this exercise, which gives you a lot of information that which going to be later be used during the implementation and during the selection phases, which at that time it would cost you maybe triple or quadruple amount of money and time. So because at that point you are already either committed or engaged with certain vendors or technologies. But if you do it right up front, you are able to really, without any strings attached, have an ideal system design in front of you. And that would be limited once you start the engagement with the vendors or the system integrators later on. So it is not a limiting exercise. I think it's more opening up more opportunities for organizations in terms of seeing what's out there, what kind of architecture can they go for, and that way it opens up more opportunities for them in terms of either reducing the risk, reducing the cost, both, or making sure that actually the system can survive the next 5 or 10 years of their business growth.
Yeah. What about companies that are, if we looked at the future state, and I totally agree, first of all, that the current state is so important to define your current state architecture and just understanding what assets you have from a technological perspective, how they integrate, what the data looks like, where the data is housed. Those are all company assets that you want to make sure you don't just throw out because you're going to replace them someday. But so that part's important for sure. But as we look to the future state, and let's just say we're implementing a big ERP system like an SAP or Oracle or Microsoft Dynamics, pick a software vendor, it doesn't matter which one, but you're implementing one of the bigger software vendors, and you've got different modules and in some cases different third-party solutions that vendor has acquired. Like with SAP, they've acquired SuccessFactors, for example, amongst other systems. How does architecture, is architecture important even in those single system, and I'll call it single system with the word with quotes around it because it's not, it's usually not a single system, but let's just say you're being sold a single system for your future state ERP. Is architecture still important in those cases, or how does it work for those big software vendors?
For sure, you made a very good point in terms of the HR, for example. In many organizations today, they have HR as a third-party supplier or somebody that is, some of that functionality is in a separate system already functioning very well. So we have a lot of examples on that kind of projects that they say, okay, let's look at the entire project with everything included, including HR and, whether we go with Microsoft, Infor, Epicor, SAP, or whatever. Let's include HR, but also let's look at what happens if we don't buy into the third-party application that the big vendor is bringing in, because we already, if we are going to go with SuccessFactors as a, no matter who owns SuccessFactors, from a technical point of view, I see that as a third-party application, right? So from a technical point of view, you're still having a third-party application. So why should I change my third-party application today, replace it with another third-party application that it's owned by the same vendor? So there might be some advantages. For example, you could be doing some cost savings. You might be doing an easier integration between the different applications. Maybe SuccessFactors integrates easier with SAP than your current, let's say, UKG application that you already have. So, but for us, is to determine what you gain and what you lose, right? So if you actually try to put, rip a UKG application just to go into SuccessFactors, it may cost you millions of dollars for some little gain, which is a little bit easier integration. But many applications, and especially many HR applications, because of the area they're playing at, they're very well versed in terms of getting integrated with major ERP systems. So these are the things that we need to consider when we are looking at the enterprise architecture and the different scenarios that I was talking about before, that we play these different scenarios and we come up with pros and cons for each one, and then we'll make a very informed decision in terms of where we're going to take the next step in terms of the architecture. So at that point is where we decide, okay, the new architecture is it makes sense to have a single solution, including the HR, or keep your current HR third-party application and just get the rest of the functionality for ERP from a major vendor, or any vendor can offer that.
Yeah. Good. Well said. Now, do you have any examples that come to mind that might be the most complex, gnarliest architecture that you've ever seen, as far as like legacy environments? I mean, could do any pop in your mind, without mentioning client names, of course, but something that's super complex or super messy in terms of number of systems or integration points or anything like that?
I have tons of examples, but something that is very striking is that no matter how big or the small the organizations are, every time we go in and open the hood of that architecture and look inside, we don't see one single engine. You always see a bunch of different applications that are working together, or sometimes working against each other, no matter how big or small the organization is. And you would be surprised at how even like technology companies, or I would say big organizations like the S&P 500 or whatever companies, they're actually working with these kind of mishmash of the applications that are thrown together and try to make sense of it. One example that comes to my mind is that we had a project overseas, and they had a bunch of different applications that Oracle was one of them, IBM Maximo was one of them, and a bunch of other applications. And we did the enterprise architecture review and design, and we discovered that with their current level of licenses that they had for Oracle, they could do actually entire application landscape, and they didn't even need to buy another software. All they had to do is to take apart all the different applications that they had for purchasing. They had also for maintenance, and a bunch of other applications, and bunch of Excel sheets and manual processes. So we just recommended to them that don't even bother buying a new software. So just take Oracle and expand its scope, which you're already paying. So that's a different kind of gain that you have also when you're going for this kind of exercise, is that often vendors and clients buy the license for the applications without even knowing what they're buying or what they're signing on, because they sign and they just say, okay, do I get everything? They say, yes, you get everything. But then when it comes to the implementing those features actually costs a lot of money. So they may not implement, and because they already have a different application. And in this case, they had IBM Maximo already in place. So what happened at the end of the day, we recommended that they take over the entire process with an Oracle license that they already had, and it went very smoothly. And they basically switched from five or six different systems into one single solution without even buying another software.
That's interesting.
So I have another example where there were 15 systems involved, and every department that had those systems purchased for their specific niche functionality, they would basically say that there would be no ERP system that could actually achieve this functionality. So once we went through the enterprise architecture, we did some research in the market, and we proven to them that switching from 15 different systems to a single solution would increase the functionality level for them, because we also evaluated their current system. So they were at around 40% coverage for their best practice business processes. we could prove to them that they could go from 40% to 80% coverage and eliminate all the different applications. Even we gave them $16,000 yearly, savings, because the current application landscape they had would cost them like around close to $1 million annual subscriptions. And if they go with a single solution, it would be actually cheaper to have one single solution covering all the bases. So these are the kinds of data that we can capture during the enterprise architecture, and also with doing a little bit more research, you can actually have very good outcomes and very interesting decisions can come out of it.
Yeah, you brought a really good point that I don't think about that often. It sort of floats around maybe in the back of my mind, but you kind of brought it to the forefront here, which is, if you look at a company that's gone out and acquired a bunch of other companies, let's just say, and they have all these assets they've acquired, and chances are pretty high you've got some technology that you're underusing, or you could be using, extending the capabilities or extending the usage of that software without necessarily having to go out and buy new technology. Now, granted, you could also end up with a bunch of really old garbage systems that you do end up having to replace. But in some cases, there's organizations that have a bunch of systems or certain types of technologies that if they just leveraged it more, they could get a lot more value out of it. And that's part of what this architecture exercise might expose to, is going through that.
And think about it, is the cost of these kind of exercise is a fraction of the ERP project or the implementation project. So it's a really very cost-effective way for you to understand and plan your digital transformation project. So I cannot think of any other aspect of the process where it could actually give you more return in terms of either time or risk, and also money in terms of the cost of the project.
Yeah, it's well said. I know I had one time I had a client, or we had a client at Third Stage that had we were talking to the CIO, and they were a company that was very involved in M&A activities. So they were out buying a bunch of companies, and they were going through this ERP evaluation with us and getting ready to start on their ERP journey. And as part of the exercise, we did this enterprise architecture piece of it, where we looked at the current state, and we had identified that there's 300 systems that they knew of that they were being used throughout the different business units in different parts of the world. But they were very concerned that there's a bunch of other systems they didn't even know about. There's sort of like these black market systems that were being used in different nooks and crannies of the organization. And, those are nooks and crannies with technologies that have data, they have assets that are company information, and you've got to identify all these different systems. But you go through this exercise, a lot of times it's almost like opening a Pandora's box of like, wow, we've got 300 different systems. We had no idea. And then you start to ask questions of, well, what are you doing in these different systems? Which ones can you get rid of? Which ones don't you want to get rid of? Or which ones can't you get rid of? And it really paints a better picture for you of what your roadmap's going to look like to how you move forward.
Yeah, and that reminded me of something else that is also very important, which is the security. In this day and age, every single application needs to be secured, needs to be somehow compliant with the new rules and regulations that are coming about in terms of who accesses the data, who has privilege over your data. And if you have an application that is 10 years old, God knows what risks you are carrying with having that as part of your architecture. You need to be able to upgrade the systems to the latest latest operating systems, at least, to make sure that there are no security holes in there. And if you're hosting these applications within your network, and I'm assuming that if you're talking about 10 years and 15 years old applications, they're all on premise, right? So these on-prem applications could could actually pose a huge risk for your organization. So it doesn't matter how secure your firewall is, how secure your entire operations is. If you have one single application that is outdated, that is running in Windows, whatever, 6 or 8 or Windows 3.11 or whatever that is, and believe it or not, we still find people that are running applications that old, that could pose a huge risk for your entire operation. So it is a good exercise for you to actually figure out, do you even need that application? Do you need to replace that today, right away, shut it down and take it out of your network? Because that's a very huge security risk for you.
Yeah, great point. And if you look at a lot of these big security breaches that have happened with public facing organizations
Exactly.
throughout the world, a lot of them are, it's usually not a situation where, oops, someone hacked into our core modern ERP system. It's usually, oops, we have this really old system that integrates with our core ERP system, but they came in through the back door through this
Exactly.
old system that they tied back to the core ERP system. And then all of a sudden that person or that nefarious actor
Yeah.
or criminal or whatever hacker got all the access to our customer data because they came in through the back door. And
Exactly.
every system in
And
both.
there is really no fix for those applications anymore, right? So they're old applications, usually running on old operating systems, and the security threats that are out there today, they were not even in anybody's mind back then, right? So it is a huge risk. I'm not saying that every single organization is bound to have these kinds of applications, but a single source of failure in the security apparatus of the organization could bring the entire organization down. And especially with ransomware threats and everything that else that is going on, all it takes is one single application or one single click on an email that will bring the entire network down, right? So yeah, that's another advantage of getting an inventory of what you have today, and each one of these applications, what do they do? Are they critical to your operation? Can they be replaced? Can be, maybe they can be just unplugged and nothing will happen,
Yeah, exactly. Super interesting. Yeah, and I think that cybersecurity is another dimension of architecture that 10 or 20 years ago wasn't really top of mind for a lot of architects. I mean, when you're architecting software and building software, you're thinking about it, but when you're deploying software, a lot of times organizations didn't have to worry as much as they do now because there's just so many different vulnerabilities and exposure points.
And for sure, moving to the cloud, somehow made that security challenge a little bit much easier to deal with, because you're giving out your on-prem, managing your network and everything else, and you're trusting the vendors that they have a secure system, they have the backups and everything else. But if you're still integrating with a single application on your website or on premise into that network of your ERP, that single application can actually extract all the information from the ERP, as you mentioned. So you still need to really understand how the entire system can be secured and not only a single application, right?
Right. Yeah, makes total sense. So coming back to this ECC event, which the QR code's right here, other than the fact that attendees will get to meet you and I, which if you ask me, that alone is enough of a reason to attend.
For you, for sure.
I mean, both. How about this? We'll agree to sign autographs. Both you and I will sign autographs if anyone who's there, because I know everyone's dying to get our autograph. But other than that, why should people attend this event? Like, what could they expect here in Orlando in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, so we have a good number of vendor representatives as well as consultants and advisors such as yourselves and I. So in those sessions that vendors basically manage, you get to see a very scripted demo from the vendors in terms of really niche functionality and key functionality within their applications. Also, you have key executives from the vendors. There are a couple of vendor panels that we have, which you can directly ask questions from the architects of the ERP applications in terms of what to expect today and what to expect from their platforms in the future. And if you are in the process of acquiring an ERP, or you're trying to understand what sort of platforms you should go for, this would be a very good opportunity for you to interact not only with advisors such as yourselves and I, but also interact with with the key decision makers and product developers at the vendors domain, but also your peers. Like, you could actually meet other people that are in the same process, in the same journey, so you can exchange information with them and also see where they are, what kind of challenges they're facing, and how they're coping with their challenges or the project. So that is a very good relaxed environment for everybody to interact and exchange. So one of the differences of this event with respect to other events that maybe people would want to go is that, first of all, we have a very impartial um, setting, so you can interact with everybody. It's not a huge event. It's a very cozy environment where you get to know everybody in the event after the third day, so you can actually interact with vendors and consultants and everybody else, and that way you can relax and exchange really good information with everybody.
Yeah, great. Well, looking forward to a way to learn from vendors and consultants, but just as importantly, maybe more importantly, learn from each other. The peer networking, and just I always find it really fascinating to watch two CIOs from two different companies, two different industries, who are commiserating about the same challenges or bouncing ideas off each other, challenges they're facing, and sometimes that part can be just as valuable as talking to the consultants and vendors as well.
For sure.
Good. So everyone should at least check out the agenda here. I would at least go look and see what the events are. It's a really good agenda you guys have put together. I'm really looking forward to it. So I encourage everyone to scan that QR code and at least look at the agenda, check it out, see if it's something of interest to you. And if you do go, be sure to find Mehdi and I, because we'll both be there. So I want to thank you for being here, Mehdi. This was a great conversation.
Thank you very much for having me, and looking forward to see you.
Absolutely. I'll see you in 2 weeks. And thank you to the audience here for being here today. And be sure to share this content with anyone you think might be interested. And we'll see you on our next live stream. Have a great week in the meantime.